In 1904, a joint excavation team working through the lower debris layers of ancient Nippur pulled a tablet from a sealed clay jar that had been buried deliberately, upside down, beneath the foundation stone of what appeared to be a private residence. The jar itself was unusual. It had been fired at a higher temperature than the surrounding pottery, sealed with bitumen, and placed in a position that suggested it was not storage. It was concealment. The team catalogued it, photographed it alongside the other finds from that layer, and then something happened that does not appear in the official excavation record. The tablet was separated from the rest of the cache. It was logged under a different manifest number, and it was shipped to London ahead of the main collection, in a smaller crate, with no explanation attached to the discrepancy. Most of the tablets pulled from Nippur during that period were standard administrative material: temple inventories, grain allocations, land boundary records, the kind of thing that fills museum basements and takes decades to catalogue. But this tablet was not standard in any physical sense. It measured roughly 4 inches by 3, which is small even for personal correspondence. It was inscribed on both faces, which was not unusual by itself. What was unusual was the third layer of text, carved into the edges, all 4 edges, running continuously around the entire perimeter of the tablet in a script so fine that the initial cataloguers at the British Museum did not recognize it as writing at all. They logged it as decorative scoring, a craftsman's finishing mark. They filed it and moved on. It sat in that classification for nearly 60 years. In 1962, a Norwegian linguist named Tor Halvorsen was working through the British Museum's back catalogue on a fellowship reviewing unstudied pre-Sargonic material. His focus was phonological drift in early cuneiform dialects, and he was not looking for anything unusual. He was looking for administrative texts from the Ur-3 period. But the edge markings on this particular tablet stopped him. He pulled it from the shelf, examined it under magnification, and within an hour he had identified it as language. Not decoration, not scoring. A complete and deliberate inscription running the entire perimeter of the tablet in a variant of cuneiform that had no direct match in any reference collection he had access to. He submitted his initial findings to his department head within 2 weeks. He described the edge text as a previously unclassified inscription in a Sumerian adjacent script requiring dedicated analysis. His department head told him to set the project aside. The fellowship had a defined scope. This tablet was not within it. There were higher priority materials waiting. Halvorsen acknowledged the instruction. He did not follow it. He worked the edge text in the evenings. Outside his official hours, he cross-referenced the symbols against every published cuneiform lexicon available in London at the time, against unpublished syllabaries in the museum's own archive, and against photograph collections from excavations he requested through inter-office channels without explaining why he needed them. It took him 4 months to establish with confidence what the edge inscription actually was. Not a prayer, not a dedicatory text, not the name of an owner or a god or a king. The edge of that tablet was covered in coordinates, geographic coordinates, ground-level markers using a Sumerian positional notation system that referenced fixed terrestrial points rather than stellar ones. Every other known instance of Sumerian coordinate notation pointed at the sky. These did not. They pointed at the earth. And when Halvorsen began plotting them, what he found was that they did not resolve to anything in Mesopotamia. Not to Nippur, not to Uruk, not to any city or temple or boundary marker in the entire known Sumerian world. The coordinates on the edge of that tablet did not point to any city in Mesopotamia, any known temple site, or any location in the ancient world the Sumerians were supposed to have known about. The coordinates, when Halvorsen plotted them against modern geographic grids, resolved to a point in the interior of Antarctica. Not coastal Antarctica. Not the edges of the continent where research stations sit and where the occasional expedition reaches. The deep interior. A region of East Antarctica that, in 1962, when Halvorsen first ran the numbers, was one of the least understood and least visited places on the surface of the Earth. He ran the calculation 3 times. The result did not change. The location the tablet points to sits above what modern researchers call the Gamburtsev Subglacial Mountains. That name means nothing to most people, and that is exactly the problem. The Gamburtsev Range is a mountain system the size of the Alps, peaks reaching nearly 10,000 feet, valleys, ridges, a complete and fully formed mountain range buried under more than a mile of ice with zero surface expression. You cannot see them. You cannot detect them by standing on the ice above them. There is nothing on the surface to suggest they exist at all. The first time any human being confirmed they were there was 1958, during the International Geophysical Year, when a Soviet seismic survey team picked up anomalous readings from equipment that was designed to measure ice thickness. They were not looking for mountains, they found them by accident. That is important. The Gamburtsev Range was not hypothesized before 1958. It was not theorized, not inferred from surrounding geology, not even suspected. It was invisible in every sense that matters. No satellite data, no aerial survey, no ground expedition had produced any evidence that a mountain range of that scale was sitting beneath that ice. And the tablet that Halvorsen was reading in a back room of the British Museum in 1962 placed something at that exact location 4,000 years earlier. The Sumerians had no Antarctic expeditions. They had no seismic equipment. They had no high-altitude reconnaissance and no concept of a continent in the southern hemisphere. Their geographic world ended well before anything that resembles the Indian Ocean. There is no version of standard history in which a Sumerian scribe had access to the interior coordinates of East Antarctica. None. And the tablet does not just give a location. That would already be difficult enough to explain. It gives a name for what is there. The Sumerian phrase carved into the edge text translates in two ways, depending on which reading Halvorsen applied to a single ambiguous glyph. The first translation is the house beneath the white stone. The second is the city under the frozen ground. Both translations use the same root word for the structure itself. That word is not the Sumerian word for a tomb. It is not the word for a ruin or a sacred site or a mythological place. It is a functional, architectural, civic word. The kind of word a Sumerian scribe would use to describe a place where people live and work and govern. It appears in the oldest city records of Mesopotamia, referring to to Uruk, Eridu, and the word the tablet uses for what is located there is the same word the Sumerians used for The face inscriptions are where the tablet becomes something different from any other Sumerian text in the existing record. The edge coordinates told Halvorsen where to look. The face text told him what was there. And what it described took him 3 years to translate, not because the language was unclear, but because the content was something he had no framework for. He kept going back to the same passages, checking the same root words against every Sumerian lexicon available to him in 1962, because the alternative, accepting what the text plainly said, was not something he was ready to do quickly. The tablet opens its face inscription with a phrase that Halvorsen rendered in his working notes as the dwelling that was sealed by the coming of the white weight. Every word in that phrase has a clean Sumerian equivalent. The word for dwelling is the same root used for permanent inhabited structures, not temporary shelters or ritual spaces. The word for sealed carries the specific sense of something closed from outside, not abandoned from within. And the white weight is not metaphor. In every other Sumerian context where that phrase appears, it refers to accumulating physical mass. Snow, ice, the slow burial of something under the pressure of accumulation over time. The tablet is describing glaciation. It is describing a place that was built in the open and then covered, progressively, by ice that came from above and did not leave. The tablet says the structure was not built by humans. It names the builders explicitly. The Sumerian word it uses is Abzu. In mainstream scholarship, the Abzu is a realm, the freshwater underground domain associated with the god Enki. But Halvorsen was careful about this point. On this tablet, the word does not function as a place name. It functions as a proper noun for a group. The Abzu built this. The Abzu sealed the record inside it. The Abzu are described in the face inscription not as a concept or a mythological location, but as a category of being, distinct, specific, named. They are the builders, and the tablet says they completed the structure before the first men walked the upper ground. Before human beings existed on the surface of this planet, something else was already building, in Antarctica. Then the tablet gives dimensions. This is the detail that stopped Halvorsen cold the first time he worked through the numbers. The structure's span is given in a Sumerian unit of distance that converts without ambiguity in the scholarly record. The figure the tablet provides works out to roughly 200 miles across. Not a chamber, not a vault or a sanctuary. 200 miles. The size of a country. Something on the scale of a metropolitan civilization, underground, beneath what is now the East Antarctic ice sheet, built by a named group of beings before the human species existed in any form the tablet recognizes. Let that number sit for a moment. 200 miles. Then the tablet continues. Because the structure being old is not the point. The point is what the tablet says it is still used for. Not was used for. Still. The face inscription does not describe the Abzu structure in the past tense. It uses a continuous present, a Sumerian grammatical construction that implies ongoing action, a state that has not concluded. Whatever the structure was built to do, the tablet says it is still doing it. Whatever was placed inside it before the ice came, the tablet says it is still there. The tablet does not say the structure was abandoned when the ice came. The beings the tablet assigns to the structure are not mentioned anywhere else in the Sumerian written record under this name. Not in the Enuma Elish, not in the Atrahasis, not in any of the administrative or mythological texts that make up the surviving corpus of Sumerian writing. The Anunnaki appear hundreds of times. The Igigi appear dozens of times. The Kalam Abzu appear exactly once on this tablet, which is either the most significant omission in ancient literature or the most significant find. The name itself is the first problem for mainstream scholarship. Kalam is a Sumerian word meaning land or the inhabited world, the same root used when Sumerians referred to their own civilization. Abzu refers to the deep freshwater realm beneath the earth, the underground domain associated with the god Enki. Put together, Kalam Abzu translates most directly as the keepers of the deep land, or, in Halvorsen's preferred rendering, the watchers of the buried place. But the tablet does not use this name as a metaphor. It uses it as a proper designation for a specific group of beings, not a concept, not a realm, a population. What the tablet says about their physical form is the part that stopped Halvorsen for 3 weeks in 1963. He returned to this passage repeatedly in his working notes, retranslating the same 6 lines from different angles, trying to find a reading that fit within normal Sumerian cosmological categories. He never found one. The tablet says, the Kalam Abzu do not carry the shape of men. It says they do not breathe the upper air, which in Sumerian is a specific phrase meaning the air of the surface world, the atmosphere above ground. And it says they have not moved from their station since before the rivers were named. That last phrase is not poetic. In Sumerian astronomical and historical texts, the naming of the rivers is a datable event, a reference point for the beginning of recorded geography. The tablet is saying these beings predate Sumerian civilization entirely. They predate the Anunnaki. They predate the Igigi. They are the older thing. The tablet assigns them 3 functions. The first is what it calls the record of all that has been. Halvorsen translated the key Sumerian word here as living record, and the choice of that word is significant because the Sumerian term he was working from does not mean a static archive. It implies something that is continuously written, an ongoing inscription, not a finished one. The record the Kalam Abzu maintain is not a library sealed at a moment in time. It is a document that is still being added to, right now, under a mile of Antarctic ice. The second function is where the tablet becomes something that researchers have struggled to categorize. The Kalam Abzu are described as preventing access to the structure from above, but the tablet does not say they do this through force or through any active defense. It says the white weight that sealed the house was drawn down deliberately. The glaciation, The ice. The tablet says it was not a natural accumulation. It was induced. It was accelerated. The specific Sumerian construction Halvorsen identified implies intentional causation, something being made to happen rather than something that occurred on its own. The ice above the Gamburtsev Subglacial Mountains is not, according to this tablet, a geological event. It is a security measure, and this is the part that researchers have had the most difficulty with. The third function assigned to the Kalam Abzu is waiting. The tablet says they are holding a specific condition, described as the return of the voice from the first sky, and that until this signal arrives, the structure remains sealed. Nothing that approaches from above will locate the entrance. That is not a translation approximation. That is close to a direct rendering of the Sumerian line as Halvorsen worked it out. The entrance cannot be found, not because it is hidden in the ordinary sense, because the beings inside are actively ensuring it remains unfindable until the condition is met. What the tablet is describing, in architectural terms, is a lock, a structure the size of a city, occupied by beings older than human civilization, performing three continuous functions: maintaining an archive that is still being written, holding the glaciation in place over the structure, and waiting for a signal before they allow anyone in. The lock is not on the door. The lock is the ice itself. The ice, according to the tablet, is not weather. What the structure holds, according to the tablet, is not treasure in any sense the modern reader would recognize. No gold, no weapons, no stored resources of any kind. What the tablet describes is a record. Specifically, it uses a Sumerian word that Halvorsen translated as the living record, a word that does not appear in any other cuneiform text in the existing catalogue. The word implies something that is not fixed, not a document carved once and left, something that continues to be written, something that updates. The record, according to the tablet, tracks cycles, and the word used for cycle here is the same word that appears in other Sumerian astronomical texts to describe a 3,600-year orbital period. Every time that cycle closes, something new is added to the archive beneath the ice. What gets added falls into three categories, and the tablet is specific about all three. The first is the count of those living, a population number. The second is the state of the upper sky, which Halvorsen interpreted as an astronomical record, a snapshot of the celestial configuration at the moment the cycle ends. The third category is the one that stopped him. The tablet calls it the intentions of the ones above, not their actions, not what they did, what they intended to do, what they had already decided. That is not a historical record. That is a ledger, and whoever is keeping it is not keeping it for humans. They are keeping it about humans, from a position above the cycle itself, recording not just what happened, but what was decided would happen before it did. The structure beneath the ice is not a library in any sense we would recognize. It is something closer to a running account maintained by whoever the Sumerians believed sat above the entire system. And then the tablet says something else. This is the part Halvorsen underlined 3 times. It says the archive can be read in 2 directions. You can read it forward from the first entry, which gives you the complete history of every cycle that has closed, or you can read it backward from the most recent entry. And here is where the translation fractures. The Sumerian word at the center of that second reading contains 2 meanings that do not separate cleanly into any other language. The word means simultaneously what is approaching and what has been set, what is about to happen, what has already been decided will happen, both at the same time, the same word. One reading makes the archive a predictive document, a record that can show you the future because it tracks patterns across thousands, NDS of years. The other reading makes it deterministic, not a forecast, a ledger of decisions already made by something above the cycle, already written down, waiting for the cycle to catch up to what is recorded. The tablet does not tell you which reading is correct. It uses the word that holds both meanings and does not resolve them. Halvorsen spent 2 years trying to determine whether the ambiguity was intentional or a limitation of the script. He never reached a conclusion. Halvorsen's working notes from 1965 have a single line written in Norwegian at the bottom of the page where he first translated that passage, and it reads, "There is no word in any language I know for what this is describing. The signal the tablet describes as the key to the structure is not a human action. It is not something the Kalam Abzu are waiting for humans to perform. It does not require a ceremony or an expedition or a decision made by anyone on the surface of this planet. What the tablet describes is something arriving from outside, from a source the Sumerians identified with a specificity that should not have been possible for a civilization working without telescopes or orbital mechanics or any instrument more sophisticated than a clay stylus pressed into wet clay. The Sumerian word used here for signal is not the everyday word for speech or voice. That distinction matters. The common Sumerian word for speech appears thousands of times across the written record in exactly the context you would expect. This is a different word. It appears only in astronomical texts. It appears only when the Sumerians are describing something that originates from a celestial body, a transmission from a physical object in the sky, rather than a communication between people. Halvorsen flagged this in his working notes immediately. The phrase is the return of the voice from the first sky. And the first sky is not a decorative phrase. It appears twice more in the broader Sumerian written record, both times in passages that describe a period before the current arrangement of the heavens, before the planets settled into the positions they now hold. The Sumerians are not describing the sky they could see. They are describing a prior configuration, an earlier astronomical order that no longer exists. The signal they say will unlock the structure beneath the ice originates from something that was present before the solar system reached its current state, before the orbit stabilized, before any of the bodies above us were where they are now. What astrophysicists now call a gravitational wave is a ripple in space-time generated by massive accelerating objects, colliding black holes, merging neutron stars, events so energetic they bend the fabric of space itself as they travel outward across billions of light years. These waves pass through everything. They cannot be blocked, cannot be absorbed, cannot be redirected, and they carry information about the objects that generated them, information about events that in some cases happened before our solar system formed, before the first sky became the current one. The Sumerians described a signal from before the present astronomical order that would travel to a fixed point beneath the ice and cause a sealed door to open. Modern physics has a name for the only type of signal that behaves that way. Humans could not detect gravitational waves at all until 2015. Not because the waves were not there. They were passing through Earth continuously. We simply had no instrument sensitive enough to register them. The Laser Interferometer, Gravitational Wave Observatory, is a machine built to detect motion smaller than a proton across a 4-kilometer tunnel. It is, in the most precise functional description you can give it, a device engineered to hear what no human ear could ever hear and what no instrument before it could register. The tablet specifies 2 conditions. The signal arrives, and the people of the upper ground have built ears that can hear what human ears cannot. Both conditions, according to any honest reading of the timeline, are now met. We built LIGO in 2015, and the tablet says the door does not open until we build ears that can hear what no human ever could. Halvorsen finished his full translation in the spring of 1967 and submitted it to 2 academic journals simultaneously. The first was the Journal of Near Eastern Studies. The second was a Norwegian academic publication called Acta Orientalia. Both rejections arrived within weeks. The stated reason in each case was insufficient corroborating evidence. That is standard language. It is the phrase journals use when they do not want to engage with a submission directly. But here is what makes that rejection significant. Halvorsen had corroborating evidence. He had already cross-referenced the tablet's geographic coordinates with the Soviet seismic survey data from 1958, the same survey that first detected the Gamburtsev Subglacial Mountains. The range existed exactly where the tablet said the structure was. Not approximately. Not in the general region. Exactly. He had also run the dimensional figures from the tablet against the scale of the subglacial basin sitting above that range, and they matched within a margin that no serious geographer could dismiss as noise. He put all of this into a follow-up letter. He sent it to both journals with the cross-references attached, the coordinate mapping, the dimensional comparison, the Soviet data. Neither journal responded. Not a rejection, not an acknowledgement, nothing. In 1969, Halvorsen was contacted by a research institute in Oslo. They offered him a senior position. The salary was significantly higher than what he was earning at the time. There was one condition attached to the offer. He would be working exclusively on pre-dynastic Egyptian material. Not Sumerian, not cuneiform, Egyptian. He took the job, and from that point forward, he never published a single word about the Antarctic Tablet. His output shifted entirely. Everything he put into print for the next 2 decades was Egyptian. The work was solid. His colleagues respected it. Nobody asked him about the Sumerian project. Nobody publicly connected his name to the tablet again. He died in 1991. His personal papers were donated to the University of Oslo. Among them was an envelope, sealed with wax. Written on the outside in his own handwriting were 6 words in Norwegian: to be opened when the ice retreats. That envelope has not been opened. It sits in the archive. Researchers who have gone through his papers have noted it. Some have photographed it. Nobody has opened it. The university holds it under standard archival protocols, which means it requires a reason to access sealed materials. No one has formally provided one. The ice above the Gamburtsev Subglacial Mountains has thinned by approximately 4% over the last 2 decades, according to satellite monitoring data published in 2023. That is not a dramatic number, but it is movement. The ice is retreating. Halvorsen wrote that instruction sometime before 1991. He did not write when the ice has melted. He wrote when it retreats. He used the word that means begins to move. That distinction is either meaningless or it is the most precise thing he ever wrote. The tablet itself is still in London. It is catalogued. It has a catalogue number assigned to it. That number is not publicly searchable in the British Museum's online database. 3 separate researchers who requested in-person access to the tablet after 2001 were told it was unavailable. 2 of those requests received no explanation at all. The third was told the tablet was undergoing conservation work. Conservation work has a standard duration at the British Museum. Artifacts are assessed, treated, and returned to accessible storage. The process is documented and scheduled. The conservation work on the tablet, according to the British Museum's public scheduling records, has no listed completion date. There are 3 ways to explain what is written on this tablet, and each one has a different set of implications. The first explanation is coincidence. The coordinates are a product of a geographic notation system the Sumerians used for other purposes, and when you plot them against a modern grid, they happen to land on the Gamburtsev range by accident. The Sumerians did not intend Antarctica. They did not know Antarctica existed. The dimensional figures that convert to roughly 200 miles across are a coincidence of unit conversion. The description of ice being drawn down deliberately to seal the structure is poetic language, not engineering. It is the simplest one. But it requires you to accept that the coordinates coincidentally resolve to one of the most geologically unusual locations on the planet, that the dimensions coincidentally match the scale of the subglacial basin above that range, and that the description of induced glaciation coincidentally maps onto a real physical process in the exact location the coordinates specify. Each of those coincidences, taken individually, is remarkable. Taken together, the probability calculation becomes something most people are not comfortable finishing. The second explanation is inheritance. The Sumerians did not discover any of this themselves. They received it. Somewhere before the ice covered the Antarctic interior, before the glaciation that geologists now date to approximately 34 million years ago began its final advance, a civilization existed that was advanced enough to map the subglacial terrain, record its coordinates in a notation system precise enough to survive translation into a modern grid 4,000 years later, and pass that knowledge forward through channels we have no surviving record of. This is the explanation most alternative historians land on. It does not require anything supernatural. It requires only a lost civilization with surveying capability and a reason to document what was going under the ice. The Sumerians are fully formed around 3500 BC, with knowledge they could not have developed independently. Maybe some of what they knew came from somewhere older. That is not a fringe position anymore. It is a question mainstream archaeology has not fully answered. The third explanation is the one the tablet itself provides, and this is the part I want you to sit with for a moment. The structure is real. The Kalam Abzu are real. The archive is real, and it is still being written. The glaciation was drawn down on purpose to protect what is underneath it. And the signal condition, the one the tablet describes as the key, the return of the voice from the first sky, has been met. We built LIGO. We detected gravitational waves in 2015. The tablet says the door does not open until the people of the upper ground build ears that can hear what no human ear can hear. That condition is now active. The tablet says what happens after the door opens in 4 words. 4 Sumerian words that translators have rendered 2 ways, and neither translation is easy to read. Either it is the return of the first ones, or it is the end of the counted time. Those are not the same thing, but they may not be different things either. Whether you accept any of that, one fact sits underneath all 3 explanations and does not change regardless of which one you choose. A clay tablet inscribed around 2400 BC contains coordinates that resolve to a mountain range buried under more than a mile of Antarctic ice. That mountain range was not known to exist until a Soviet seismic survey detected it in 1958. The tablet predates that discovery by more than 3,500 years. That is not interpretation. That is not a translation argument. The Gamburtsev Subglacial Mountains were discovered in 1958, and the tablet that describes their location has been sitting in a wooden crate in London since 1904.